We are back on Taking Care of Business with Clay and Marty, and our guest is Dr. William Allen.
You know, Dr. Allen, I was quite impressed. I was reading over your resume, and you are political philosophy in the Department of Political Science at Michigan State University. You've been associated with Villanova University. It looks like James Madison, Princeton. You have quite a resume, as well as being a published author.
Well, I believe that's only a consequence of getting old, don't you think, Marty?
Well,
Marty ought to know that one.
Bill, I have to attribute that to Clay.
Okay, sorry about that. I can't quite, over this 3,000-mile distance, figure out which voice I'm hearing.
Well, Clay is the pretty one.
And if that's the case, we're in deep trouble. And,
all right.
And see, Bill, unfortunately, I can't make any age jokes because I know you and Clay are the same age, so I've got to... So I have the inside tracked on that, so I've got to be real careful. I want to ask you another question about the Muslim Brotherhood, because I don't know a whole lot about that organization, but I was looking it up, and because who was it, Clay, or you might know, Bill, made that interesting comment about the Muslim Brotherhood not being a threat? Or
Clapper, wasn't that Clapper?
That was our National Intelligence Director, Mr. Clapper.
Who gets his information from Fox News?
I don't think so.
Apparently.
I don't think so. That sounds like something. You're shaking your head, yes?
Yes, he did. That was what he did when he was on one of the talk shows recently.
Oh, that sounds like something MSNBC would say. But anyways, I did a little research, and all it took was 2 or 3 clicks on the computer, so it wasn't really difficult to do the research. But Zarqawi was an old Muslim Brotherhood member, and he's not exactly the most friendliest guy in the world, so, towards the West. So where are these guys coming from? These are the guys that are in leadership in this country, and when they come off making comments like that, it makes you wonder, are we all on the same page here? I mean, what's
just another reminder that this administration's policy is confused. He was speaking not simply out of his personal ignorance, but out of an attempt to reflect the administration's alignment on these questions. They would like us to begin to think of the Muslim Brotherhood in the way that Mr. El-Baradei describes it, as a not merely religious but also largely secular organization. And it simply is not true. Mm-hmm. But they would like us to think that, because that then supports the policy initiatives they want to pursue.
Right, and actually they're very steeped in Sharia law, which is nothing but unfriendly towards Western values. Oh,
to be sure, you may also reflect that the radical Islamist agenda derives from the Muslim Brotherhood. Mm-hmm. That's where it originates. That's where bin Laden gets the ideas that he is pursuing.
Bill, I'm glad that you've come out of your shell for this interview, and you're...
Just because I'm retired doesn't mean I'm no longer thinking.
There you go, exactly. One of the things that the media was trying to portray is that this is strictly a youth and a social network revolution. What do you think about that? I mean, is it... I know you were saying there's probably some players behind the scenes that haven't really appeared yet, but are they just egging the youth on, or is this, truly a social network revolution?
This is professionally organized. Yes, of course, it makes use of youth. It set out deliberately, as also is the case in Tunisia, to put the youth in the forefront. They do that for obvious reasons of attracting public sympathy. But it has professional organization behind it, and that they should think to use the youth in order to present the public face of the movement is only to be ascribed to their intelligence and seriousness in the business.
Bill, this is Clay again, and I'd sort of like to get back to the problems that Israel might face depending on which direction Egypt goes. Maybe you can address those issues.
Well, again, Israel, of course, has been for a long time in mortal danger in that region of the world. And now I'm sure in Israel they believe that the level of danger has increased significantly. It is for 2 reasons. One, because they do not know yet what the outcome of this is going to be and how severe it will become. And 2, in this period of instability, there will open up many other opportunities for those seeking to exploit the very instability itself, to open up salience for attacking Israel. So Israel must be on the highest possible alert at this moment.
Definitely. We're having a conversation with Dr. William Allen on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180.
Bill, do you think Israel would possibly strike first if they felt they were going to be attacked?
This is not like the Iranian nuclear situation, which is to say there's no target for them to attack. So they would not attack first in that sense, because it is not clear where one would attack yet. One has to first be able to isolate command, control, and communications in order to launch an effective attack. And Israel is not yet in a position to do that. But whereas in the case of Iran, they know exactly what they would have to do, and we can tell how they're going to decide by what they've already done with Iran. They had told us early on in 2009, after the new president came in, that something had to be done by the end of 2009 or they would attack. Well, it turned out they did attack. It just didn't come in the form of airplanes and bombs. It came in the form of targeted assassinations, and it came in the form of a cyber attack. That all happened at the end of 2009, just as they told us they would have to do to try to defend themselves. Take that then as evidence that you can count on the Israelis to do what they need to do to defend themselves as soon as they recognize a definite threat and a coherent target.
I would certainly hate to be going up against Israel based on their history.
I'm sure that Egypt would also, based on its history with Israel. But remember, the question in Egypt now is who's going to be in charge. Will the generals actually manage this process in such a way that they create the introduction of democratic practices in Egypt without fundamentally changing the regime in Egypt? If they do that, the danger for Israel will be reduced. If they do not do that, the danger for Israel will be increased. But at this moment, the likelihood of someone taking command of the forces that have produced the changes and radicalizing them is very high, just as was the case when the Shah of Iran was overthrown in 1978 and 79. Some people think that the Ayatollah Khomeini simply exploited a youth revolt in Iran. Not true. I know I was living in France at the time, and that's where Khomeini was in exile. And I was perfectly aware that he was using the technology of his age, just as the technology of this age is being used in Egypt. He was using tape-recorded cassette messages. And the whole time he was in France, having them distributed throughout Iran in order to prepare for the moment of that revolution. Something similar happened this time with social networking. So that the modes of revolution haven't changed, the technology has merely evolved.
Well, it appears from everything that's taken place that the outcome we're witnessing right now in Egypt is actually the best outcome there could be for the United States at this time.
Well, it's better than we deserve based on the efforts of our administration, i.e., because Mubarak and the generals decided not simply to listen to the administration, but to take matters into their own hands. Then there is a remote possibility that what we're going to see happen here is that they will stabilize the circumstances and not surrender to the influence of the radicals who will be seeking to take command of it.
Bill, let me run a theory by you, okay? And I've talked about this on the air before, and it's just a theory on my part, okay? And I think you might know, if this is correct thinking or not. Last summer we had in Romania, where the territory is almost exactly like Tehran, we had a helicopter go down, and it had 5 Israeli pilots, a couple of American pilots, and 1 Romanian in the plane. And I remember that type of helicopter. We were still flying those when I was in the Marines in the late 60s, early 70s. And, the only reason I can think of you would have that many pilots on that kind of plane in that kind of training area is to train for a long-distance flight that would go from an area like maybe Turkey to, say, Iran, because the mistake we made in the Carter administration on the failed attempt we had there is we had 1 pilot, and there was pilot fatigue and error in that flight. So my thinking is they're training for, special forces are training now for the possibility of having to do that kind of operation in Iran.
I believe that's quite likely possible. We don't know for sure. One thing we do know is that we can no longer count on Turkey, neither Israel or the United States. We discovered that in 2003. And since then, Turkey has been loosening its commitment to NATO and to the United States. It has loosened its alliance with Israel. So we must be looking for alternative routes. That's the most important thing we know. We cannot count on Turkey. So if you look at it in that context, it is a fair judgment to conclude that this is trying to find other ways to get to Tehran.
You know, Bill, I wish we had 2 hours, but we don't. Let's pick up there in a minute. We'll be back. We're talking with Dr. William Allen on 1180 Kern Newstalk Radio. We'll be right back.